This is Mark Kastel with OrganicEye. I'm speaking to you from west coast of Wisconsin. Once again, my makeup artist and hairstylist have been off. We're casual in our workplaces, scattered around the country. Today, we're going to be talking about sanitizers and their impact on organic food and how it's processed. I should tell you that most of us define organic food as being grown without any types of dangerous toxic pesticides, herbicides, insecticides, fungicides for a minimum of 3 years applied to the crops on a given piece of land prior to certification. And after that, a very careful monitoring of how plants are grown, promoting nutrient density, managing pests without the need for toxic chemicals. And, but we also, what's less scrutinized is how organic food is processed. Now, I got my last, actually one or two more boxes to go. I got my most recent CSA box from Harmony Valley Farms here in Wisconsin. Beautiful, just gorgeous artisan produce. But they have a packing shed. So it's incumbent upon them to make sure that that shed is sanitary. They grow vegetables in the natural environment where pathogens exist. And so they're cleaning that. If we are processing dairy products, meat, finished products, be they canned or frozen or in a box or preserved of some kind, nature, they have to go through a processing plant. And so at the National Organic Standards Board, the diverse stakeholder group, it's incumbent upon them to make sure that they're watching over the regulations, what's permitted, how that's enforced. So at this point, I want to introduce Dr. Terry Shistar, who is the lead scientist at both Beyond Pesticides and OrganicEye. She's a member of the OrganicEye management team. Terry has very carefully scrutinized the materials used in organic manufacturing and organic growing for many years, the most comprehensive look at this in the nation. And so Terry, I'm wondering if you could first give us a brief overview of sanitizers, how they differ from cleaning agents just a little bit, and then why we should be concerned about this. So can I turn this over to you, please, Terry?
Okay. Well, there's kind of a continuum between, with cleaning agents and sanitizers and disinfectants. And the thing that's at issue is that OFPA, the Organic Foods Production Act, requires that materials that are used in any synthetic materials that are used in organic production and materials that are used in organic handling be on the national list, be reviewed by the National Organic Standards Board, and if they meet the criteria in the law, be put on the national list. It also
let me just interject, Terry. Basically, farmers and processors can't use any synthetics unless they are reviewed for safety and they're on the list, right?
Correct. So one of the things that the law requires is that, that materials that are reviewed and put on the national list be approved for specific uses. Now, that's something that hasn't been done for sanitizers, disinfectants, and cleansers. As a matter of fact, there's only one material that's on the national list as a cleanser, and that's phosphoric acid. So because, okay, so there are a couple of problems with this. One is that certifiers don't have a very good, they don't have the basis for making very good decisions on this, especially when it comes to cleansers, because if you're using a bucket to harvest your crop, you're going out and picking apples and you're putting them in a bucket. Well, there's nothing on the national list that you would use to wash that bucket. And so certifiers have basically taken the position that you can use anything as long as you rinse it out. As far as sanitizers go, things that, and this is an area where it becomes more important that we know exactly what the sanitizers are doing, because we're talking about things that are going to protect against food pathogens, things that are pathogenic to both people and to the plants and things that might rot the fruits and vegetables. And there's a few things that are on the national list for that purpose, but they haven't been reviewed for the very specific purpose for what they're used. For example, there are storage rooms. Okay, they have to be cleaned out. That, you know, they should be free of pathogens. There are the buckets that I talked about. There are things that are used to wash the actual fruits and vegetables. But none of these things are, none of the materials that are on the national list as sanitizers are listed for those specific uses. And I know there are people who know a lot more than I do about what the specific uses are, but that's the first thing that needs to be done. They need that the NOSB needs to identify what are the specific uses that are, what are the specific needs that the organic producers have for cleaning and disinfecting.
Terry, let me interject just for a moment here so people understand the gravity of what we're talking about. Unlike the cleanser that would be used in the bucket that you were talking about, when a processing plant is cleaned at the end of a production shift, and Krista, I don't know if I'm on screen or just Terry here. So once the plant is cleaned, then these sanitizers are applied, usually in a spray form, and they're meant to stay in contact with the surfaces and provide a quote kill and a residual kill. So that might happen overnight or in between shifts. But I can tell you that from my experience working as a consultant helping develop organic companies starting back in the 80s when commercialization just occurred, there are very few manufacturing plants in the country that are exclusively running organic product. Mostly they run conventional product, and they under contract also process organically. It is a requirement in most cases to prevent intermingling between conventional crop and organic crop. Maybe it's in milk running through the tubes and storage tanks and pasteurizer in a dairy plant. It's required that the first production run of the day in a quote clean plant take place for organics. So whatever residuals are there from these sanitizers are coming in contact with organic food. So the NOSB has to look at whether these products are safe, whether they're going to damage the environment, whether they're going to harm workers, and whether they're essential. Is there a safer or a natural product that could do the same job? So I'm turning this back to you, Terry, but I just wanted to frame why this is so important to not just the business interests that may be paying attention to this, but all of us who eat organic food.
Well, yes, and when you talk about these residual products, they're often the most toxic things. Now, I don't have a lot of experience with reviewing these sanitizers and disinfectants that are used in organic production, but Beyond Pesticides has been reviewing sanitizers and disinfectants that are used in buildings and on surfaces to protect people from COVID-19. And one of the things that we found is that the materials that are used that have the highest residual are the quaternary ammonium compounds, or quats. And those are by far the most toxic of the disinfectants that are used. So it bothers me that that what you say, that a plant would be used first thing after having these residual products applied. They should be cleaned after that. I mean, normally we think of cleaning of something that happens before the disinfection, but we need to remove those disinfectants too. And some, a lot of the disinfectants evaporate. They're pretty much gone they would be gone by the next day. But if you're adding something that has a potential and actually is designed to leave a residual, then you'd want to make sure that you clean it up before you add it. I mean, this is part of the reason that we've called for this comprehensive review, because we don't know what people are using. There is this general principle that that certifiers are using, which says that it doesn't matter what it is if you rinse it off, if you wash it off. And there are two problems with that. One is it ignores all the hazards to the workers and that might be in contact with it. The other one is that the Organic Foods Production Act requires us to look at a broader viewpoint, not just the residues in food, not just the effect on the farmers, not just the effect on the soil, though all those things are important. It also requires us to look at the effects in manufacturing and the effects in the disposal of it. And even things that might be regarded as pretty innocuous, like your dish detergent that might be used for those buckets, may have severe environmental effects when they wash into streams. We've been talking about nonylphenol ethoxylates as a so-called inert ingredient in pesticides, but nonylphenol ethoxylates are also a surfactant that's used in a lot of detergents. And so it's not the case that something that would be used and washed off would meet the criteria in the Organic Foods Production Act. So go on.
Yeah, Terry, I was just going to ask you if you maybe wanted to comment. The reason we're holding this just brief primer on sanitizers is that the NOSB, and partly at your prompting, is paying more attention. And so they had a panel presentation virtually in front of the board last week. I'm interested in your take, if there was anything interesting takeaways that you gleaned. But what really upset me, and this isn't the first time I've been upset by how the USDA has come in and managed the NOSB process, and that there were 3 panel members. One was from Ecolabs, one of the Ecolab, Econolab, one of the largest manufacturers. Ecolab, I'm sorry. Yeah. And they're one of the largest manufacturers of these chemicals that are used in plants.
And they petition materials before the NOSB.
Yes, so they have a conflict of interest, you would say. Then they had another member of the panel, Terry, that was from the trade group that represented the chemical manufacturers in the specialty. They're called specialty chemicals. And then the third was a longtime consultant who's worked for a myriad of different corporate interests in organics, the people who, again, are petitioning to use synthetics before the NOSB. There were no public interest scientists like yourself and others that would have been able to potentially provide a more independent take on what we should be thinking about when choosing. So I would say, what were your takeaways, and what might you have said, or what questions would you have posed if you were on that panel, what the NOSB members should be thinking about?
Well, I had the feeling that except for the last person you mentioned, Bob, what's his name? Anyway, the other two panelists were not familiar with organic. They weren't familiar with the Organic Foods Production Act. And so they were mostly focused on evaluating the chemicals, and also on things like rotating chemicals to avoid resistance. And there seemed to be at least one of the panelists seemed to assume that somebody had already identified these different uses. So I think my main takeaway was they didn't do the first thing that needed to be done, which was to identify the needs for sanitizers, disinfectants, and cleansers in organic production. Before you go anyplace else, you have to identify what the needs are. You can't start evaluating chemicals to meet those needs until you know what the needs are. So nobody did that. And then because they didn't do that, they couldn't evaluate anything according to those needs. And when they were talking about the different chemicals, they weren't talking about the criteria in the Organic Foods Production Act for evaluating chemicals. They were mostly using the tools in the toolbox kind of thing. We need plenty of tools so that we can combat resistance by having other things that we can rotate to. So that was my main criticism of the panel. They spent a lot of time, and some of them said lots of good things, but they didn't get down to the nitty-gritty of what needs to be done. So what I think needs to be done in this comprehensive review that we've been calling for years is first to identify the needs. Can't go anywhere without doing that. And second, to identify the candidates of sanitizers and disinfectants and cleansers that could meet those needs. And then third, to evaluate them according to the criteria in OFPA.
Yes, okay, well, again, I want you to comment because, and maybe we don't know enough about the entire class of these chemicals, but the criterion that the NOSB has to take into consideration before they approve something synthetic that is either an ingredient or could have contact in our food, and many of these things are safe and innocuous. Like I always like to use the quintessential example is baking powder. You can't have organic cupcakes without a leavening agent. And there's no evidence that that's harmful to human health or the environment. But the NOSB is charged with looking at human health. And since this material comes in contact with our food, that has to be in play. Environmental stewardship, when we buy organic food, we think we're investing in a better way to steward our planet, not something that would be equally as damaging to conventional if there are alternatives. And then maybe you could, and it has to be compatible with the organic systems approach, which is what I think you're saying is they're putting the cart before the horse. We need to understand how this works into the system. And then finally, is it essential? Are there safer synthetics? If it is a synthetic, is there something safer that's already approved? Or is there something natural, or best case scenario, derived through organic agriculture that can be used instead? And if there is something safer, they should not approve that. So Terry, I want to just put that into context.
Well, yeah. And that's basically what I was saying. You need to, that's what the NOSB is required to look at.
Okay.
And And that's
Well,
what we've been asking them to do for I don't know, last 5 or 6 years.
well, you've used this term tools in the toolbox. That makes the hair stand up on the back of my neck, because we've heard this for drugs for animal agriculture. We've heard this for chemicals for crop production. We're hearing this for processing. It comes out of the mouth many times of the same NOSB members that are affiliated with the large organic lobby group, industry lobby group. And, in general, there are people in this industry that want to see organic grow. They're interested in organic sales dollars, less interested in what organic really still means. And so one term, I don't know if you caught this or not, but the same person I'm thinking of who used the term tools in the toolbox also used the term nanoparticles or nanotechnology, where evidently some of these chemical sanitizers use nanoparticles because they're more apt to, I guess, be able to infiltrate with the organisms that we're trying to kill. But that also means that they're able to contaminate our food. And at OrganicEye and Beyond Pesticides, we're very, very concerned that the USDA organic program and the NOSB has not properly gone on the record prohibiting any kind of nanotechnology used in organic food because of the potential for those to pass through our digestive system and get into our bloodstream. There's just too many unknowns to suggest that they're perfectly safe. Terry.
The NOSB has passed a recommendation against using engineered nanoparticles in organic production any way, in any form. The problem is that the NOP, the National Organic Program, has not put that into effect. You probably recall that that at the time that it was passed, Miles McAvoy said, "Oh well, we will take it into consideration, but we're not going to put this into regulation or anything."
Yeah.
So
I stand corrected a little bit. The NOSB has addressed it. There's been no follow-up. I mean, this is part of our problem, macro problem, is that under Miles McAvoy, who was running the National Organic Program at the time, he's no longer there. They took away the ability of the NOSB to set their own agenda and work plan and tried to silence them. Well, it's not complete. They still can speak out as individuals. They can speak out during board meetings. And so we're going to revisit this issue and see if legally we can figure out a lever that can force the USDA to take action, because it should be a prohibited method and it's not compatible with organics.
well, that's right. And as you know, there are several recommendations from the NOSB that have not been implemented by the
Several. You're being way too polite. There are dozens, scores. So we do the work. And
I don't have an exact count.
Yeah. Well, when I started doing this work 17 years ago, watchdogging, there were 50 pending back then, and many of those were never implemented, and they've only grown. It's so disrespectful, not only to these board members, Terry, but every one of these measures, whether it's policy like prohibiting nanotechnology or looking at particular chemicals or substances, engages the entire organic community in written and public oral testimony, bringing experts in. We'd like more balance many times, but it's a process. Sometimes it takes years to come up with a NOSB recommendation, and then to have that just gather dust, or even worse, under the current Trump Purdue administration. And I wish I could. I've complained about every administration. This seems to be worse. They actually just overrule. The secretary just decides to overrule one letter from the Organic Trade Association or from some industry interest could trump the entire organic community, all that multiple years process. So let me just ask Krista if we have any questions. If not, we've been on for about a half an hour. I think probably that's long enough. I want to encourage anybody viewing to continue to monitor the OrganicEye and Beyond Pesticide Facebook pages and websites. If you're not already signed up on the OrganicEye free news, e-news list, please sign up. And we will make sure if this is an area that you have an interest in, that you're kept up to date the next time that your voice might have an impact. Krista, do we have any questions?
Not right now, no.
Okay.
I would
Could you-
encourage anyone, if there are any questions that you haven't had the opportunity to ask, or you weren't sure if you should ask, to go ahead and send those in the chat box.
So, and then we'll address those online. So thank you, Krista, our technical engineer, and thank you, Dr. Terry Shistar from, are you in Kansas or Missouri today?
Kansas.
Kansas, okay. And I'm in Wisconsin. Our offices in Washington are closed. We're scattered, we're safe. And I hope you and your families are also. So this is OrganicEye, a investigative arm of Beyond Pesticides, signing off. Thank you very much.